The Committee on House Administration will come back to order. I note that a quorum is present. Without objection, the chair may declare a recess at any time. I've been looking forward to these next 2 days of hearings because it's one of the most important and impactful roles we have as a committee. These hearings present our commitment to oversight and transparency on behalf of the entire House. As members of Congress elected by the people for the people, it is our duty to be accountable to the people. We're tasked with being good stewards of taxpayer dollars to ensure Congress and each committee is working effectively for the American people. Committees are where so much critical work is accomplished. Each committee has a unique role to play in ensuring Congress is serving all Americans, from factory workers to farmers to students to veterans to law enforcement to election administrators and our military. Committees also ensure we're exercising robust checks and balances on the other branches of government, like preventing the weaponization of federal agencies. Our job over the next 2 days is to hear from both the chair and ranking members of each committee on what resources they need to accomplish their respective goals. In keeping with our commitment to transparency, our process to fund committees will be conducted by restoring regular order, which this committee has not done since 2017. Today and tomorrow, each committee's chair and ranking member will present their respective biennial funding requests. Our committee's role is to authorize and not appropriate. It's critically important to me that our review and approval process is completed with full candor. At the close of our hearing tomorrow, we will have provided the American taxpayer with more transparency on how Congress is spending their hard-earned money. We'll continue our goal of being an open, accessible, and transparent committee, and we look forward to giving every other committee the platform to do the same through this process. Congress will be accountable to the American people. I now recognize Ranking Member Morelli for 5 minutes for the purpose of making an opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman Stile, for your opening remarks and for convening this hearing. House rules require that this committee must report and the House must adopt a primary expense resolution to provide funding to most select and standing committees in each Congress. And the funding process is a collaborative enterprise, and it has traditionally been the most bipartisan effort the Committee on House Administration undertakes. I would like to thank all of our committee chairs and ranking members for working with us to allow this committee to fulfill the obligations we are tasked with by the House rules. I would also like to note the work of the bipartisan House administration staff who's been managing all this paper before us. Eddie Flaherty has led the effort on our team, and I'd like to recognize as well Hillary Lassiter and Janet Schwab from the Republican staff as well for their cooperation. So over the next few days, I look forward to continuing the discussion with the committee leadership before us on their oversight plans and budgets. I know that not everyone will get everything they want, but I am confident that we can work together to make sure everyone gets what they need to fulfill their responsibilities, and looking forward to this exercise, looking forward to the testimony and the discussion today and tomorrow and in the days ahead. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the ranking member. Without objection, all other members' opening statements will be made part of the hearing record if they're submitted to the committee clerk by 5 p.m. today. Today we'll hear from the chair and ranking member of 12 committees, beginning with the Committee on Oversight and Accountability. For each panel, we'll begin by recognizing the chair for 5 minutes, followed by the ranking member. Then the majority and minority will each have 5 total minutes per side to question the witnesses, and I will keep the clock reasonably tight on that. I now welcome our first panel of witnesses, Chairman Comer and Ranking Member Raskin. As a reminder, we have read your entire written statement, and it will appear in full in the hearing record. Under Committee Rule 9, you're to limit your oral presentation to a brief summary of your written statement, unless I, in consultation with the ranking member, extend the time period. Please remember to press the button in the microphone in front of you so that it is on and members can hear you. When you begin to speak, a light in front of you will turn green. When the red light comes on, your 5 minutes have expired, and we ask you to please wrap up. I now recognize Chairman Comer for 5 minutes, followed by Ranking Member Raskin. Mr. Comer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, for holding this committee funding hearing today. Ranking Member Raskin and I are pleased to submit the House Oversight and Accountability Committee's budget request for the 118th Congress. Our budget request seeks $29.9 million. If accepted, this is a modest increase of 2.5%, not adjusted for inflation. This is also a combined budget request. It will operate both the committee and the select subcommittee on the coronavirus pandemic. Ranking Member Raskin and the minority will receive 33% of the budget and staff positions. Our committee's mission is to protect taxpayer dollars from fraud, waste, abuse, and mismanagement, and works to ensure the efficiency, effectiveness, and accountability of the federal government. Therefore, our budget request is an investment in oversight. It is an investment in skilled staff and a commitment to travel to conduct oversight. To conduct fulsome oversight and meaningful investigations, the committee needs skilled and experienced staff. The committee has recruited and continues to recruit staff with oversight expertise and diverse skill sets. Our proposed budget will allow the committee to not only recruit, but retain legal and investigative staff to do our important oversight work. Our budget request anticipates 118 staff positions for the committee, both majority and minority, with an additional 15 staff positions for the select subcommittee for a total of 133 staff positions. The committee and the nation has returned to in-person work. Therefore, as a part of our oversight mission, we will resume conducting a significant amount of oversight outside the Capitol Beltway. The committee plans to hold 5 field hearings, perform site visits, and conduct investigative work in our states. Our nation is a big, diverse nation. To understand America's needs, priorities, and concerns, we must hear directly from them. By resuming previous levels of oversight travel, we will be able to better conduct robust oversight on behalf of the American people. Lastly, the committee's budget includes the Select Subcommittee's budget. The Select Subcommittee will be conducting essential oversight to understand the origins of COVID-19 virus and lessons learned from our federal government's response to the pandemic. To conduct this oversight, the Select Subcommittee will need staff with specialized scientific and medical expertise. In closing, Ranking Member Raskins and I appreciate your consideration for our budget request. We also appreciate your commitment to our committee's oversight mission. We're looking forward to fulfilling this important mission during the 118th Congress. Thank you, and I yield back.
The ranking member is recognized. Ms. Ranking Member Raskin, if I could, I don't believe your mic is on, which is not being picked up then on the live feed.
I'm sorry.
Although I can hear you. Thank you.
I'll just start again. Just briefly, Mr. Chairman, the role of our committee is to ensure that our government, as we make, are working effectively, efficiently, and actively for the American people. And to fulfill the mission, we need to recruit and retain experienced staff with a diverse set of skills and experience. The committee has an extremely hardworking staff, which is passionate about public service and about the mission of the committee. The budget we have proposed and our agreed upon allocation of funding will enable the oversight work of the 118th Congress. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I stand ready with Chairman Comer to answer questions you may have.
Thank you both. I now recognize myself for the purpose of questioning our witnesses. Chairman Comer, the coronavirus subcommittee from last Congress has been replaced in this Congress with the coronavirus pandemic subcommittee. Could you give insight as to how the new subcommittee will differ in its mission and purpose from last Congress? And then also, what official resources does the subcommittee need to properly fund and operate?
It's going to be the exact same budget that the committee had in the previous Congress. I think this Congress, we're going to be focused more on the origination of COVID-19 as well as trying to focus more on the grant process that was used to fund different types of coronavirus research.
Mr. Chairman, if I can, the microphones, although we can hear each other, I think just fine. I know the folks involved in the live feed are interested to hear you as well.
Basically, it's the same budget as the previous Congress. The mission though similar, we'll focus more on the origination of COVID-19, as well as we'll examine the tax dollars that were potentially used for gain-of-function research, any type of coronavirus research. We're also going to look at the vaccines, anything post-COVID now. I think a lot of what the committee was focused on prior to this Congress was pre and current COVID. We're going to be looking a lot on post-COVID, learn from mistakes. We're going to try to determine the extent of the American investment in COVID, not just in potential research and origination type things, but as well as, hopefully learning from mistakes moving forward.
Thank you very much. I and I think many Americans are interested in the work of this subcommittee and appreciate your focus on that. Let me shift from the big picture, if I can, into a little bit more of the mundane, because I think it's important to this committee as we think about the use of taxpayer dollars. The Committee on Oversight and Accountability currently uses a document management system called Concordance. Not sure how familiar we are with this, but curious if you have insight as to how effective the software is in managing the committee's documents, and if it's a software that's easy to use and maintain. One of the things we're often looking for is shared services, ways to better leverage the purchasing power of the House, and curious if you could give us a little insight into your experience with this program.
Yeah, the Concordance software, it's difficult to use, it's costly, and difficult to train staff on how to use. We would like to use a more robust software package, but they are cost prohibitive on the current committee budget. These other packages are more user-friendly and have better systems in place to organize and search documents and production, so that's a challenge for us.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate that. I know that's kind of in the weeds, but it's one of the things that we're looking at this committee is where we can leverage shared services to better provide services to all committees and protect taxpayers. Appreciate your time. Appreciate both of you being here. We miss you, Ranking Member Raskin, from serving on this committee. Maybe you'll be able to return at some point in the future. I now will yield and recognize Ranking Member Morelli for the purpose of asking questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to you, Chairman Comer, for being here. And Mr. Raskin and I spent 4 quality years on the Rules Committee together, so I miss spending all that time with you, but nice to see you, Ranking Member. I want to just begin by checking in relative to the allocation to the minority, and I know the committee's generally now splitting 2/3, 1/3, with some small exceptions, but I understand you're in agreement with the proposal. I just want to confirm that if granted, the minority will have unrestricted access to the resources they need, Mr. Chairman?
We agreed to the 2/3, 1/3.
Yes, but beyond that, just to make sure that, confirm that they will have unrestricted access to the resources they need within that 1/3.
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
Very good, very good. And to you, Mr. Raskin, you're confident that that you reach an agreement which will allow you access to the dollars you need within the context of the budget agreement?
Yeah, within the 2/3, 1/3 split, I've got every confidence
Very good.
that the chairman will honor that. And if he wants to make it more like 60-40, that's good too. So.
I'll leave that to you. Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I thank both the chairman and the ranking member for your testimony and for appearing before us today. Thank you very much. The testimony's been helpful.
Am I allowed to ask questions?
Yeah, we have time remaining. If the chair and ranking member do, I'll yield to Mr. Griffith for
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
asking questions.
Mr. Chairman Comer.
Yes, sir.
I see that you're getting 15 additional staffers. I'm not sure that's enough for you all. I note that E&C is only getting 8. We have some overlap, but I'm just wondering if you think that you might need a little bit more, and I certainly believe that E&C probably needs some more with all the oversight that we need to do. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, there's a lot of oversight needed in this town. No shortage of oversight demand. We could get into an argument over how much oversight was provided previously in the last 2 years of this administration, but regardless, we would love to have more, but I'm pretty confident we'll be able to manage on what we have. We've requested a lot of information, and hopefully some of this information will start coming in. I don't think this administration understands Oversight yet, and that's our role. Not just the Oversight Committee, but Energy and Commerce and every other committee has oversight jurisdiction. So we're ready to go, but I'm confident that we'll be able to manage. But it would always be nice to have more staff.
And further, Mr. Chairman Comer, I would just suggest that, and I'm sure they're already doing it, your team talk with Alan Slobodan of the Energy and Commerce Oversight Team. He has done tremendous work on Origins and has a lot of holes and a lot of questions.
Yeah, absolutely, and a lot of good stuff coming out now. So
Yeah,
more to come, I'm sure.
I appreciate it. Yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, I appreciate the time of the ranking member and the chair for coming before us. Your testimony was helpful. Wish you a good day. Thank you.
Thank you all.
We'll pause while our next witnesses arrive.
Test.
What do I speak? The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has now begun offering eco-grief training for its employees. Yes, you heard me correctly. Eco-grief, a made-up condition that provides an opportunity for our oh-so-delicate employees who are allegedly struggling with a sense of trauma as they witness what they claim is a changing environment.
We will reconvene. I'd like to welcome Chairman Bost and Ranking Member Takano of the Committee on Veterans Affairs. As a reminder, we've read your written statement, and we ask that you limit your testimony to 5 minutes. We're going to dive right in, and I'll now recognize Chairman Bost for 5 minutes.
All right, thank you, Chairman Steele and Ranking Member Morrell, for the opportunity to discuss the Committee on Veterans Affairs budget for the 118th. Ranking Member Takano and I, who joins me here, we have submitted our funding request for the 118th Congress per your committee's guidance. And as you know, the committee has oversight of the entire Department of Veterans Affairs, various programs serving veterans at the Department of Labor and Defense, Arlington National Cemetery, and our overseas cemeteries, as well as all other matters. All to ensure that the VA is meeting their mission for the over 9 million veterans, their families, and their survivors they serve every single day. VA is the second largest federal agency and the largest integrated health care system in the country, employing over 380,000 people with a budget of $303 billion this fiscal year. Now, since 2017, the VA has seen budgetary growth of over $120 billion and employees growth of nearly 20,000. To put that in perspective, the number of employees added to the VA workforce is in the last 6 years alone is roughly equivalent to 3 times the population of my hometown in Murfreesboro, Illinois. So needless to say, oversight of such a vastly growing government agency is critical. Ensuring effective stewardship of taxpayer dollars is essential for the delivery of care and services to our veterans, and wasting of those dollars is unacceptable. We owe it to our veterans and taxpayers to ensure VA is making market progress regarding veterans' access to health care, wait times at the hospitals and clinics, proper use of the Mission Act, and the backlog of disability claims, implementation of the electronic health record, and more recently, the implementation of the PACT Act. To accomplish this mission, the committee needs essential talented staff with experience. And accordingly, we requested a 4% increase in the committee's annual personal budget for 2024. Realizing that the size of the primary agency the committee oversees, I hope we can all agree that it is a modest investment to make. At this time, we are not requesting additional resources for the committee travel and equipment needs. We, with the current budget allotted for the travel and committee, has independently been able to conduct vitally important investigations of whistleblower complaints at various VA facilities across the country. These investigations are essential for the establishing an accurate picture of what is happening on the ground relative to what we're being told here in D.C. Mr. Chairman, you have my assurance that we'll continue to account for and stretch every dollar afforded us as we meet and exceed the expectations placed upon us. But my humble request of you and the ranking member and the members of the committee is that we build on the oversight successes we've made in recent years with a small addition to the personal budget that I have previously mentioned. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today, and I know that Mr. Takano will say more on the bipartisan work that the committee has done together and what we plan to accomplish this Congress for the veterans and their families. And I would be glad to answer any questions when Mr. Takano has finished his remarks.
Thank you very much, Chairman Bost. Now recognize the Ranking Member, Mr. Takano.
Thank you, Chairman Steele and Ranking Member Morelli, for having us here today to talk about the budget for the House Committee on Veterans Affairs in the 118th Congress. Our committee was one of the busiest last Congress. Working together, we had some remarkable achievements. We passed 83 bills out of the House, and 36 of those became law, the second most of any House committee. Chief among these achievements is is that we upheld our promise to take care of toxic exposed veterans, delivering long overdue benefits and care to over 3.5 million veterans. We made progress in addressing veteran suicide. We work to improve veteran economic well-being by addressing the root causes of homelessness and enhancing access to educational opportunities. We also began the overdue work to bring equity to underserved veteran populations. While we have much to be proud of, there is still much work to be done. I thank the members and committee staff who worked with me on these efforts and who made these accomplishments possible. The work to improve care and services for veterans will always be a constant, and the committee has also the important responsibility of overseeing the implementation of the laws that were enacted last Congress. One thing that underscores our work is that much of it is bipartisan. Certainly, Chairman Boss and I have our policy disagreements, but I believe that we and our staff have worked productively over the last 4 years, and I expect that spirit of cooperation and bipartisanship to continue this Congress. Chairman Boss and I have agreed to this budget request, and I believe it will allow us to continue our important work. Our mandate is to ensure that those who have worn the uniform of this country receive the benefits they are owed, and to oversee the second largest department in the federal government. We do this work as one of the smallest standing committees in the House. If we want to meet that mandate, we have to have the funding to hire and retain excellent staff who understand the complexities of veterans' issues. We also need a budget which supports robust oversight travel, so both staff and members get out into the field to assess all aspects of VA's operations, including more than 1,200 sites of care spread across the United States, its territories, and the Philippines. I want to note that past practice in our committee has been that funding for salaries is allocated according to the traditional 2/3, 1/3 division. However, the rest of the funding has been drawn from both majority and minority staff, including for travel and equipment. We did not quibble over spending requests, and equipment and travel requests approved by the Republican staff director were approved by the Democratic staff director. I think we've operated from a place of mutual respect for each other and with the goal of ensuring staff that we have what they need to get the job done. The internal budgeting process has reflected this approach so far, and I thank Chairman Boss for continuing in that spirit. How Congress chooses to allocate funding should be demonstrative of our values. Our commitment must be to ensure that we continue to do more for veterans than say simply, thank you for your service. Adequately funding our committee is an important part of that commitment. So I thank you for your consideration of our work and this funding request. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Ranking Member. Each side will have 5 total minutes for questions. For purposes of the majority's time, I'm going to yield to Mr. Griffith for purpose of asking questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. In your budget request, you stated that you are requesting an increase in personal compensation for the second session of the 118th Congress to retain up to 42 experienced employees in order to effectively oversee the VA, the second largest federal agency. What challenges have you faced in recruiting and retaining staff with the expertise and knowledge that your committee needs to function effectively?
Well, thank you, Mr. Griffin, for that question. And, you know, experts in veterans policy can be hard to find. So we want to ensure that both sides have enough money to adequately compensate staff and retain them. And that's the tough thing, is to be able to have keep the competent staff that we have.
And also, last year you spent over $100,000 on travel, and now you're requesting $150,000 for travel for both sessions of the 118th Congress. Is committee travel an essential part of your committee's oversight responsibilities?
Yeah, yes, it is. We travel for general site visits. We also hold field hearings to get a true idea of what's happening on the ground. That's really our job to do that. We also need to use the budget to travel to VA facilities at the drop of a hat when things go wrong, because if you wait 5 minutes, you think there's nothing going on. 5 minutes from now, it will then happen. But I also want to I need to anticipate the travel that is going to increase because we're now gone from COVID and we need to get out to those locations.
Well, let me say, I do think that's important, Mr. Chairman, because before redistricting, I had a veterans hospital in my district. Now it's a few miles outside of my district. But when I go to visit, I always learn things and things that we probably ought to be doing here to make things better at the various hospitals.
We've got to be in the field to make sure that things are being done right.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Mr. Griffith, might I just add
Yes.
one thing? Mr. Chairman Boss and I have both shared a concern over the electronic health records. Chairman Rowe, when Phil Rowe was the chair, he established we established a 5th subcommittee related to, we call it the Technology Modernization Committee. We need, finding people who have that expertise in computer technology, in electronic health records, as you might imagine, trying to pay salaries that are competitive is difficult. And so this is, I think, a good example to share with you in terms of just, the struggles and challenges we face in that area.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back to you, and I assume we're going to reserve the rest of the time in case you have a question.
Absolutely reserve the balance of the majority's time, and I'll yield to the ranking member for the purpose of asking questions for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Chairman Bost and Ranking Member Takano. I note that Ms. Torres and I were members of the Rules Committee in the last session, and 2 of you appeared several times in front of us. Appreciate all the work that you did on behalf of our nation's veterans, and I know there is a lot of work left to do, so appreciate you both being here. I want to just ask a question I'll ask throughout the day, which is relative to the agreement you struck. Mr. Chair, do you anticipate giving unrestricted access to the resources the minority has allocated to it?
Yeah, that's always been the bipartisan way that we've handled the committee in the past. We've always taken great pride in the fact that it's bipartisan. We know that the oversight and the things that we need to do, both our staff and their staff, whether minority or majority, needs to be in the field, needs to have the oversight that we've been assigned so that we can do it in a way. It's really about the veterans and making sure that the services are being provided. It's not about what letter is behind your name.
I appreciate that very much. And Mr. Takano, are you confident that you'll have access to the resources, or are you comfortable with that?
I'm comfortable. I am comfortable with that. My relationship with the chairman, I think, has been one of mutual respect. And certainly in the 4 years that I held the chairmanship, we have accorded every courtesy in terms of budget requests and travel requests from when Chairman Boss led the minority. So I fully expect reciprocation. I don't have any indication otherwise, and I have great confidence that this relationship will continue.
Very good. I do note you have a pretty active hearing schedule that we had as one of the exhibits here. Appreciate that. I'm not sure. I see a couple of Wisconsin hearings. I'm sure that has nothing to do with the chairman of our committee, but if you find yourselves looking for another place, we'd love to have you in upstate New York as well. But I would like to ask, I know that in the last Congress, there was an effort that this committee helped put together across House officer teams for field hearings, established that the Sergeant of Arms coordinate with Capitol Police, and there's a series of agencies that come together to help facilitate. Will you utilize that process? Are you aware of it, and will you utilize it?
We will use, it's the same process by which we've done before, and then, we've got to make sure that when we have our hearings that they're secure. That's just a natural act, no matter what group is there. We hope that there are not people that would do us harm while we're out, but we always want to make sure that the security is done.
And I think it also uses the clerk's office to make sure that there are court reporters, broadcasting, live streaming, et cetera. So I would certainly be happy to know that you're using that system. I think it's costs. It helps us keep costs down and helps make sure that they flow in a thoughtful way. So thank you for that. Appreciate you both being here. Appreciate the agreement and appreciate your good work. I'll yield back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. The gentleman yields back. Appreciate both of your guys' testimony here today, Chairman Bost, Ranking Member Takano. We appreciate that you're coming to Wisconsin, both to the Toma facility, which has had challenges, so it's good that you're coming back there, but as well as your visit to Milwaukee. Appreciate the work you do and what is one of the most important committees in this House to make sure that the men and women who've worn the United States military uniform have the resources and benefits that they earned while serving our country. With no further questions from either side, we thank you for your testimony today. Have a good afternoon.
Does this work? Is this better? Can you hear me? Test. Is the antenna working? Can you hear me? This is the ranking member? Okay. Good.
Testing 1 2 3. Test 1 2 3. Bryce, do you hear me? If you hear me, please text me. Testing 1 2 3.
Chairman Westerman, Ranking Member Grijalva, we appreciate you being here today as we continue our commitment to regular order and accountability to the American taxpayers. For purposes of the hearing today, we're going to do 5 minutes from both the chair and the ranking member, and then 5 minutes of questions total from each side of the dais. I'll now recognize Chairman Westerman for the purposes of an opening statement.
Chairman Stile, Ranking Member Morrell, thank you. And members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to present the Committee on Natural Resources budget request for the 118th Congress. I do recognize the challenging task that you have in allocating resources among committees and appreciate the opportunity to make the case for the Natural Resources Committee. And first off, I want to talk about the committee because I think there's it's one of the most underknown or underappreciated committees in Congress. Our committee turns out a lot of work. We've got 5 subcommittees with jurisdiction over American energy and minerals, over insular and tribal affairs, federal lands and waters, wildlife and fisheries, as well as oversight of the Department of Interior and certain agencies within the Department of Commerce and Agriculture. We are one of the busiest committees in the House. During the 117th Congress, we were first among all standing committees with 124 bills reported. We had a total of 109 hearings, 21 full committee markups. We also took our work to 46 different destinations across the U.S. and its territories. Yet while we're at the top of the list for legislative activity and jurisdiction spanning literally from the Arctic Circle to the Marianas Trench, we fall to number 11 amongst committees when it comes to funding levels. We're requesting a budget increase this year of roughly 9%, and that's authorized levels for 2022. What this increase will do is allow the committee to attract and retain talented staff to address our broad and unique jurisdiction, to fund robust and a robust travel and field hearings agenda, oversight and educational site visits, and redesign and modernize our communications platform, including our website. A top priority of the Natural Resources Committee in this Congress is to bring Congress to the people. And when you think about the issues involving natural resources, this is something you really need to get outside the Beltway with. We've already had a field hearing and a field hearing in Odessa, Texas, and a site visit to New Mexico. And we're planning to hold at least 10 to 15 more field hearings in each session of the 118th Congress. This is the area where we need increased funding to achieve these goals. This is also a year that the compacts in the South Pacific, which fall under the jurisdiction of our committee, are being renewed. and we need to spend some time at our territories in the South Pacific and down in those freely associated states. So really what we're asking for a larger travel budget and a slight increase to be able to attract and retain high quality staff members. And with that, hope that you will have a favorable consideration, and I believe Ranking Member Grijalva can verify the work that we're trying to do, and I'll yield back.
Thank you very much, Chairman Westerman. Ranking Member Grijalva is recognized for 5 minutes. Will the ranking member, is your microphone on? I can hear you clearly, but I know our live feed may not.
Is it on now? Should I start first? No. Please continue. Thank you. The chairman mentioned it. It's difficult to overstate the importance of the work of our committee. Our jurisdiction includes vital issues that go to the heart of so many of people's lives in this country. We oversee our people's public lands and waters, including conservation, recreation, and development. That multi-use mission of the committee. We are stewards of the very sovereignty of the tribal nations that we have been since before the Constitution. We have the responsibility of promoting self-determination and the well-being of U.S. territory and freely associated states. Those are important responsibilities, huge responsibilities of the committee that we collectively take very seriously. We're at the center of federal efforts toward environmental justice, and that concept has been made a vital component of any response to the climate crisis. Our committee oversees our national parks, wildlife refuges, fisheries, and other water resources in places of severe drought. We conduct oversight of the Endangered Species Act, the National Environmental Policy Act, and an array of other bedrock statutes. Over the last Congress, as the chairman indicated, the committee and its staff were extremely productive. In the 117, about 893 measures referred to us, held 141 official meetings, 21 full committee meetings, and filed 142 committee reports. Our friends at Energy and Commerce were second with 79 reports, a little less than half of what we produced. As told, our committee has passed scores of bills in the House, and 149 passed the Senate and became law, 149. In the recent Congress, we have consistently punched above our weight. Although Chairman Westerman and I have a degree of policy difference, to say the least, and we feel quite strongly in our positions and our philosophies toward that multi-use concept and our jurisdiction, we do agree on the importance of our shared work, and that sustaining this level and the quality of activity requires a full roster of majority, minority, and nonpartisan staff. We want to attract and keep the best, and these skilled and dedicated public servants are needed now more than ever, and the resources help us retain and also bring into our personnel and into our professional ranks really, really good people that will serve the American people. I know that Chairman Westerman understands the importance of the resources for the minority, and having recently him being the ranking member in the previous Congress. We hope that the courtesies that we extended to each other as we move forward, there was a point in which the minority needed additional resources that we as the majority were glad to provide, because we understand that this is a shared responsibility we have, and we'll be bugging the chairman to return the courtesy at some point, but that your allocation to us will go a long way to that discussion. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
I thank the ranking member. The majority and minority will each now have 5 total minutes to ask questions. I will now yield to Mr. Carey for the purpose of asking questions for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Westerman and Ranking Member Hova, really appreciate your testimony today. And also, I know, Mr. Chairman, you mentioned that this is one of those committees that a lot of people don't watch. I will tell you, I spent 25 years watching the committee, sometimes with seeing the good things you did and sometimes not so good. But one of the things that you mentioned in your questionnaire was that of field hearings and on-site educational opportunities and increased oversight visits are among some of your highest priorities. I would agree with that because I think it's very difficult for you doing what you're doing when you're looking at critical minerals, when you're looking at our energy deposits. It really is important to be on the ground. What additional resources does your committee need in order to perform these important oversight functions?
That's a great question. I appreciate that. And first off, you need staff. You can't. To plan these hearings takes a lot of logistics and a lot of effort, so we need staff to be able to do all of the planning and to make the field hearings worthwhile. When we did the Odessa field hearing, we were able to take folks from the recording studio down there, which gave the hearing a much higher quality presentation. We also need the funding to do that. So it kind of comes down to quality staff and funding, and those two also go hand in hand.
Thank you for that, and I would agree with that. The other thing, Mr. Chairman, I think you were the one that mentioned, in your budget request, you mentioned that the Committee on House Administration's recent Running an Effective Committee in the Majority Series and new professional development programs offered by the CAO have been beneficial to your committee staff. What additional training would you like the committee or the COA to provide, or CAO to provide?
Yeah, and we have had staff take advantage of the CAO training, and I think that's very important when we don't not only want to take quality staff in, we want to be able to develop those staff to even higher quality. So the programs that CAO offer gives our staff the opportunity to do that, and I do appreciate the committee's emphasis on that, and can say thank you from our committee for the opportunities for our staff to have professional development.
And just last question, Chairman, what are the challenges that you foresee for your committee during this 118th Congress?
It's always a challenge when you're dealing with the issues that we're talking about inside a building here in D.C. to see the real effect that's happening out in the real world. We're talking about mining, we're talking about oil and gas extraction, we're talking about fishing, we're talking about tribal issues and forestry, and nothing takes the place of being out in the field, seeing what happens in real life. I know as a forester, you can talk about it all you want in a room, but when you're standing out in the forest and you're looking at poor management or good management, it will make the light bulb come on. So it's a challenge for us on the educational side to make sure that we're making policy based on the best science and data and facts, and the way to do that is to get out in the field and talk to people who are facing the issues every day.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your comments and wholeheartedly agree with your sentiments, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. We reserve the balance of our time. I recognize the ranking member for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to you, Mr. Chairman, you, Mr. Ranking Member, for all of your hard work and your stewardship of the committee. Since you were talking about field hearings, I want to just get a sense. I asked this of the previous chair and ranking member when they came in. Within the last Congress, there was a system developed that coordinates Sergeant of Arms, Capitol Police, the clerk's office for purpose of court reporters, the chief administrative officer around broadcasting, live streaming, et cetera. Do you intend to use that system that's been developed to conduct your field hearings?
We do intend to use that like we did on the first field hearing that we did.
Very good. And just so I can be assured of this, I appreciate the fact that you two have agreed on budget and distribution of resources. Mr. Chairman, do you expect that you'll give unrestricted access to the resources that the minority has coming to them?
Yeah, we've, tradition has been we divide the resources up 2/3 and 1/3, and that's the plan to do that going forward.
Great. And so you commit to making sure that they have access to the resource that you've allocated for them?
Correct.
Yeah. Mr. Ranking Member, are you confident that you will have access to the resources you need within the allocation?
Yeah, yes, I do. I don't have a question about that. In my time on this committee, that has been if not a policy, a tradition that has happened without question, and I have full confidence that that's going to occur.
Very good. Any questions? I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate both of you being here with us today. It's our commitment to openness, to regular order, and to transparency. And I appreciate your committee's commitment to a robust oversight agenda this Congress. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, and now we'll go back to hearing.
man.
We're going to continue with our hearing. I thank Chairman Arrington, Ranking Member Boyle for being with us today. Today is our continuation of being open, transparent to the American people and returning the House to regular order. We appreciate you being here. We're going to recognize both the chairman and the ranking member for 5 minutes for the purpose of opening statements, followed by 5 total minutes of questions from both the minority and the majority before us. Chairman Arrington is now recognized for the purpose of making an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Morelli, appreciate y'all's leadership. We have to run our House responsibly like every hardworking American, and we talk a lot about getting our fiscal house in order, but I appreciate that House operations go beyond just the resources and making sure that that we're doing the right things the right way with the American people's resources. So I appreciate the job that you all do to endeavor to that goal. I want to start by saying Brendan Boyle is my ranking member, a friend and a colleague from our time on Ways and Means. We will have differences of opinion, sometimes wildly different. We will debate in a very robust way and hopefully a very thoughtful way. But I'm very excited about serving alongside of my Democrat colleague. And next, I'd like to address the issue at hand directly in terms of resources for our Budget Committee operations. I contend that the Budget Committee is an A committee because there's not a bigger problem to solve, there's not a greater challenge that we face as a nation than our runaway spending, most of which is on auto spend on the mandatory side, and this unsustainable fiscal path that our country's on. If we don't intervene, I think the outcome will be disastrous and possibly irreparable if it's a sovereign debt crisis. But whether it's a sovereign debt crisis or this slow economic demise of the greatest country, greatest economy in the world, and we lose our influence in the world as a result, our ability to defend our homeland, our ability to provide security for our seniors, and the list goes on of laudable and righteous things that we do as a nation for our fellow citizens. That all can be undone and undermined if we don't get our fiscal house in order. I would also say that Republicans have contributed their fair share to this irresponsible fiscal state of the union. And while I'm definitely going to beat up on my Democrat colleagues and this president for the $5 trillion in additional deficit spending in just the last 2 years, I recognize that fiscal irresponsibility is not unique to one party or the other. And if we see it any differently, we'll never work together to solve this problem. Fact is, that's the truth, but it's also the only way to get everybody in the boat and rowing, as I said earlier, away from the waterfall, the Niagara Falls of the fiscal cliff that we're heading to rapidly. To me, we've got a lot of good things that we can do for our country, a lot of very difficult decisions to make. All the easy decisions, Mr. Ranking Member, I think have been made, if there were any. We now have the tough decisions to make. And we need the best team and the best operation, but we need to lead by example. And so my recommendation
is that we don't increase our budget. And I may come back next year and we may decrease it, because we're going to have to cut spending. We're going to have to grow the economy, and we're going to have to deal with the real debt drivers. And I don't know how in the world, first principle of leadership, Mr. Boyle, where I come from in Texas, I bet your people in Pennsylvania feel the same way. First principle is you lead by example. And so we're in 23 now, so let's just keep the 23 budget at 22 levels. Let's keep the split the way it is. I think we're as generous to the minority as any committee, if not the most generous. That was tradition, not just our proposal. But let's try to make do with the monies we have committed, and maybe we come back and look for ways to reduce that and continue on our great mission here to save the country from a debt crisis. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member, for the opportunity. And with that, I yield back.
Ranking Member's recognized.
Yeah, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ranking Member, as well as to the members of this committee. Let me first thank Chairman Arrington, my friend Jody, for his leadership in developing our committee budget. I'm proud to say that on this budget, we agree. That might not extend to another budget that we'll be debating, but on this budget, we happen to agree. First, let me just point out to my Republican friends, you could not have made a better choice when it comes to your choice for chair of the committee, a bright, hardworking, patriotic member of Congress, and I'm proud to call him a friend. We'll have good, principled, hopefully insightful debates, and then ideally we'll arrive at the right decision, and hopefully in the end the American people will be better off for it. In the end, I know in his heart that's what he wants for our country, and that's what I want as well. In terms of the specifics for our budget on the Budget Committee, the majority will make 1/3 of the funding and resources available to the minority for personnel. That is exactly consistent with past practice. Also consistent with the past, the majority budget will continue to cover equipment for both staffs, ensuring access for both majority and minority. And we are in full agreement on a flat budget for this year. I happen to wish the committee had more funds to execute its responsibilities, but that said, I agree with the chairman that the funds that are being provided here will be sufficient. I'm fortunate enough, despite the fact that going from majority to minority, obviously our side is taking the bulk of the hit. Nonetheless, we have been retained the entirety of the minority staff with one unfortunate exception. I also want to credit my predecessor, Chairman Yarmouth, who strategically did not fill positions when they were becoming open and we had personnel who were retiring in order to be prepared in case we were to be a minority. That advantage made this process a great deal easier. And while I'm thinking of it, I know Jody would share in this, I want to thank Gary and Greg and me, Gary Andres and Greg Waring, staff, the Republican and Democratic staff directors respectfully, who have done a wonderful job to date. So I want to reiterate what an honor and privilege it is to serve as ranking member of the Budget Committee. Hopeful that despite our honest and principled policy differences, the chairman and I will be able to find common ground on more than just our committee budget. And with that, I will do something in this House, yield back the remainder of my time.
We appreciate that. Also rare to see a budget request come in with a 0% increase. We appreciate that as well. Chairman Arrington, you and I have had a chance to talk previously about the kind of the broken budget process reform. You come in with a 0% increase. One of the priorities that you set forward is really looking back at the budget process, coming forward with nonpartisan legislation as it relates to fixing the underlying process that continues to allow this institution to not get its job done. Do you think you have the resources you need to move forward with, I think, that really important priority under the budget you set forward today?
I think fixing the broken process, because fundamentally having systemic problems with the institution, or i.e. broken process, is very difficult to yield anything but broken outcomes. And I'm a big proponent of bipartisan process reforms. We started a group, we call it a caucus, it's actually not an official caucus, where we had at one time 30 Democrats and 30 Republicans. Mr. Morelli, who looked at soup to nuts why and where this process breaks down so often, and we end up with a four corners massive spending bill nobody feels good about in the end. I suspect Democrats don't feel any better than Republicans. And even if your pet projects on either side are buried in the spending, it's just not good business. And I don't know another government in the world. We'll look together at how other governments run, but I don't know a government in the world that has such a dysfunctional process. So from the most benign sort of biennial budget consideration to fiscal state of the union in a bipartisan, bicameral way to really shine a light for the American people on math, not the different ways of fixing it from my view or my colleagues' view, but just the mathematic reality and some of the reality of the broken process. To debt targets, debt to GDP. I know Sheldon Whitehouse, who is chairing the budget committee in the Senate, is big on the debt to GDP targets with the glide slope down. I love that idea. I think there's a long list of things that we could propose. Scott Peters and I from San Diego, Democrat, introduced the Responsible Budget Act that would actually replace the debt ceiling with real debate over real reforms. And so I guess the bottom line is the American people see a lot of the conflict and contentiousness. What they may not see enough of, unfortunately, if they're watching cable news, is have a lot of common ground and consensus around making this process work better. So, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ranking Member, I am totally committed. We're going to get through our budget resolution process early on and through this debt ceiling negotiation. But once we get further out into the open, it's going to be a great and satisfying endeavor to go with Brendan Boyle and my Democrat colleagues into the process and make those fundamental reforms.
Appreciate it. It's an issue I think that I would love to see legislation come out this Congress to really fix the broken underlying process. One quick follow-up in the minute that we have left is we look at your oversight role, both over the Congressional Budget Office, but over federal spending writ large and the federal budget writ large. Do you think you have the resources on the oversight side? The oversight piece is going to be a huge, important piece of this Congress.
Well, I see the House Budget Committee's responsibilities much more broadly, I think, than some. It's not just a budget resolution. To me, we are the Budget Accountability Committee, and we should look at the spending, the consequential, or the consequences rather of inflation and high interest rates. We should look at economic growth. 1% of GDP growth over 10-year horizons is $3 trillion. We shouldn't accept that it's just 1.7 or 1.8 or whatever the CBO is projecting. We've done better. We can do better. And so I have a broader view of pro-growth, pro-work, pro-energy policies that will help this country grow again so we can do what they did in World War II or after, which is bend the spending but grow the economy and get it back to that solid footing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Morelli, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you to you, Mr. Chairman, and to the ranking member. I have great confidence that having spent the last 4 years a member of the Budget Committee, really appreciate your devotion to task. And I would just note parenthetically, too, you use Niagara Falls in your analogy. I wouldn't entirely necessarily embrace the analogy, but do appreciate an upstate New York reference. So you're welcome to come to Niagara Falls anytime, and we would be happy to host you. And I would love to work with you both on making certain that our country's fiscal health is in order and provides growth and opportunity for not only this generation, for a generation of Americans to come, so I look forward to that. But as the chairman said, our responsibility here is to look at the agreement you've reached, and appreciate the fact that you have reached an agreement, and the two of you are in accordance on the distribution of resources. I just want to ask you, Mr. Chairman, appreciate the fact that you made the distribution. I'm asking each of the chair, just for the record, want to make sure that you're comfortable with and will allow unrestricted access to Ranking Member Boyle for his portion and allocation in the budget over the next year.
Well, we are committed to that, and that's, if it's not on paper, we'll put it on paper, but he has my word. I want him to feel good about it. The conflict shouldn't be on resources between our colleagues. It should be on ideas that are debated, and so I'm committed to that.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm happy to take your word for it. I don't think we need to put it in writing, but I do appreciate that. And to the ranking member, who's a longtime friend and somebody I have enormous confidence in, are you comfortable with the arrangement and feel as though you have the resources within the agreement you've reached to be able to do what you need to do?
Yeah, two things on that. First, I absolutely take Jody's word for it, and appreciate his pledge on that. And then second, I would say is, I mean, let's be candid. We're no longer in a period in which either political party has a permanent majority in this chamber. So I have served in the majority, the minority. The House is probably 50-50 up for grabs facing next election. I think it serves both sides well to be fair to one another when it comes to these sorts of things. Because today's majority will at some point be tomorrow's minority, and then the day after that will be the majority again. That's just the reality that we're in.
Well, I appreciate that, and I actually appreciate very much. I know we're going to have we've had several folks come in prior to this, and we'll have many more to come, but really appreciate the sincerity, which I think you both exhibited and demonstrated, your willingness to work together. And, we're not going to always agree on policy, but certainly appreciate agreement on civility and conducting ourselves in ways that the American public would be proud of. So thank you for being here. I yield back.
I appreciate the chairman and the ranking member's time today, part of our commitment to regular order and restoring accountability in today's government. Thank you very much. I thank the chair and the ranking member for coming in today. Today's hearing is all part of our commitment to, one, restoring regular order here in the People's House, but also transparency and accountability to the American people. We're going to recognize both the chair and the ranking member for 5 minutes for purposes of opening statements. Then the majority and the minority will have a total of 5 minutes to ask questions in follow-up. I'll now recognize Chairman Tom Cole for the purpose of an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Chairman Steele, Ranking Member Morelli, old friends like my friend Mr. Torres. This is a great committee. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me to testify on the budget request for the Committee on Rules for the 118th Congress. I appreciate the thoughtful and deliberate work you do to ensure that the committees have the resources they need to fulfill our constitutional mandate. Along with my partner and very good friend on the committee, Ranking Member Jim McGovern, I respectfully request level funding for the 118th Congress to carry out our institutional responsibilities on behalf of the American people. As my colleagues who previously served on the Rules Committee, Ranking Member Morelli and Ms. Torres, are well aware, on our committee we have no margin for error or delay. We have no ability to turn down work in response to insufficient resources, we have no ability to calibrate our workload based on available funds. When the House is considering legislation, the Rules Committee must be open for business. Preparing legislation for the floor comes with high fixed costs that don't disappear when the resources get tight. Many other committees may have weeks or months to prepare their work product. However, the Rules Committee's agenda is measured in days, hours, and minutes. As a result of the committee's essential and unique role, we invest heavily in a custom automated workflow system, one that allows us to process thousands of amendments in a matter of days. In the 117th Congress, the committee processed over 8,500 amendment submissions, an increase of 14% over the previous Congress. We expect to exceed that number, perhaps by a significant amount, in this Congress. We are encouraged by the level of member and staff engagement in the legislative process so far this Congress, and look forward to partnering with committees to move exceptional work product to the House floor in a deliberative process whereby all voices can be heard. While the Committee on Rules is a standing committee, its function is different than any other. Without the Committee on Rules operating at peak efficiency, the entire institution suffers. Our committee's responsibility is the timely delivery of business to the floor, maintaining the Republican conference's commitment to transparency and openness in the legislative process, and the fair and efficient handling of member requests. Due to the previous investments that your committee has allowed us to make, both in staff and technology, we believe we can rise to the challenges and opportunities and we will certainly confront in the next 2 years without an increase in funding. As such, our budget request for the 118th Congress is a flat funding request of $8,335,614, equally divided between each session. Thank you for your consideration of our request, and I'm prepared to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Chairman Cole. Ranking Member McGovern, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Chairman Stile and Ranking Member Morelli and the members of the Committee on House Administration. I'm pleased to be joining my good friend Chairman Cole in presenting our request for funding for the Committee on Rules for the 118th Congress. Our committee, as Mr. Cole has pointed out, is unique. Our primary mission is not to write laws nor conduct direct oversight, but rather to facilitate the work of all House committees and of the House itself. That means we don't typically hire experts on one specific policy. Our staff tracks every policy question that comes to the House floor, and are seasoned experts on House procedures and precedents. And as Ranking Member Morelli and Congresswoman Torres know from personal experience, our work does not run on a schedule limited by business hours. We know late nights better than anyone else in these halls. Further, our workload has only grown in recent years. For example, as recently as the 114th Congress, our committee received under 4,000 amendment submissions for our consideration. Last Congress, we received over 8,500 submissions. We take the responsibility of keeping this institution functioning very seriously, and I believe that we have succeeded in being a resource for all members and staff serving here. A big part of that success has been our ability to hire and retain our extraordinary staff on both sides of the aisle. And let me emphasize the word extraordinary. We have also succeeded by keeping our disagreements where they belong, on matters of substance. When it comes to the logistics of running the committee and working within the budget allocated to us, I could not ask for a better partner than my good friend from Oklahoma, Mr. Cole. Over the last 2 Congresses, we worked closely as chair and ranking member, and I look forward to continuing that relationship with our roles reversed. Although I'd like the arrangement previously better, but anyway. I'm also grateful that Chairman Cole is continuing our committee's long tradition of providing the minority full control over 1/3 of the overall budget. I support the request of this committee from my chairman that we be provided the same amount of funding for each of the next 2 years as were provided for the last year. These funds will allow us to continue supporting this institution, from its leadership to its committees, to the staffs of every member office. And I thank you for your time and your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. The majority and the minority will now have a total of 5 minutes to ask the witnesses questions. The majority will now yield to Mr. Murphy for the purpose of asking questions for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for coming today. I'm just going to try to make this brief. You guys are asking essentially for a 10% increase over last time. This part of the committee process is new. Is that bad math?
Yeah, our request is a flat budget.
Flat budget for 23, 24, then how can that be 10% over what was done in the 117th? Somebody help with that?
You want?
Yeah, I think we got a midsection increase in the 117th Congress, and so we are simply asking for a flat level as we go
The
forward.
flat level from the increase last
Yeah.
time?
Yeah.
And that did not come at the beginning, so
Okay, so my question is, just because we're trying to save money and all this other stuff. Last time you and the majority spent 83% of your funds, correct? That's what I'm
Correct.
seeing here. The minority spent 100%. To what do you owe the increased need? What is going to be the increased need for this?
We're asking for the same amount as last year.
All right, well, I'm looking at a different number then, so,
it was provided in 2022. So,
I'm looking at 7.5 million last time and 8.3 million this time. Is that correct? Am I just looking at the wrong numbers? I'm not arguing with you.
No,
I just wanted to know what the difference is going to be. What new investments are there?
there was a new committee funding resolution that was done in 2022. So, that was the budget we operated off in 2022. We're not asking for an increase for 23 and 24.
All right, got it.
Yeah.
I don't have any issues. I think y'all run pretty lean and mean. You're not planning on having any field hearings in Alaska or anything like this, such, correct?
That's correct.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really don't have any considerations. I'll yield back.
I reserve the balance of my time. I'll now recognize the Ranking Member Morelli for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Cole, Ranking Member McGovern, for being here. I find myself in a rare disagreement with the Chair and Ranking Member. I was prepared to support a doubling of their allocation, but apparently they've asked for less than that. I will admit, and I think Ms. Torres would agree with me, that it's hard to imagine the amount of time and energy that the Rules Committee members put into this endeavor, all hours of day and night, often with less perhaps notice than we would like, and many hours sometimes waiting around for the committee to get going because we're just waiting on other things to happen here in the House, and the staff is remarkable on both sides. Appreciate all of their work, and one of the only downsides to being on the ranker on this committee is not serving on the Rules Committee any longer. So I really do appreciate the work that they do. They do it both sides with great civility, have worked incredibly hard to advance the interest of the American public. And I know it sounds like a advertisement for the committee, but I'm really grateful to you. One question I've asked of each of the chairs and ranking members, and I very much appreciate the fact that you've agreed on the allocation. Mr. Chairman, you commit to just making sure that the minority has unrestricted access to their portion of the allocation that is given to the committee?
Absolutely. We certainly got that courtesy from then Chairman McGovern. When I was there, we've tried to extend that back. We think that's important, and honestly, we do have a terrific working relationship between the two staffs, as my friend knows. And they are candid with one another. They share back and forth with one another. They understand, how difficult these jobs are, and honestly, I think have worked together extraordinarily well to facilitate things. And and Ms. Torres knows as former members, we deal with some really controversial items, and there's not a break. We're doing it every single week that we're in session, and I'm really proud of the example my friend, the ranking member, set as chairman in terms of maintaining, and my colleagues are up on the dais, maintaining the really collegial and cooperative relationship between the two sides. So you have my firm commitment that my friend, the ranking member, has complete control over his 1/3 of the total allocation.
I appreciate that. Anything further you'd like to add, Mr. McGovern?
I agree with him.
Wow. I appreciate that.
I wish I heard that more in my own committee.
I would like to reserve just a moment or two and yield to my friend, Ms. Torres.
I just want to thank you both for coming to our committee, our new committee assignment here, and to say that while I agree 100% with your budget, I'm just very concerned about the staff time, the long hours that it seems to just continue to grow, every year. The time that they spent working at the Capitol, dealing with amendments and the late hours. I don't know how to improve that, but I will leave that to both of you to figure out how to improve those working conditions for the staff. Thank you.
I yield back, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Thank you to both for being here and for all the great work you do.
Briefly, in the time that the majority has left, I just wanted to follow up with one question if I can with you, Chairman Cole. One of the things that this committee's been looking at is kind of software solutions and whether or not there's any enterprise solutions. And I know your committee has worked with a program called CORE. I'm not sure how familiar you are with this in Dropbox. I know you have a significant number of documents that come in often late at night. Curious, your request includes $250,000 to make necessary updates and adjustments to the core software. Could you just comment briefly as to the essential purpose of this software, just so we get an understanding as we think through potential enterprise solutions?
Asking me for anything technological is probably, you've immediately moved me beyond my competence. But I will tell you this, it's just the sheer volume of work and the speed at which technology has changed that, we have to be constantly able to adapt. And again, we're not asking for more money in the overall budget. Right. We're just actually making efficiencies within our own budget and redirecting resources there so we can stay on top of the flow of paper. So the amendment requests are staggering. Right. And we don't expect that to slow down. We're happy that, look, that just means members are engaged and they've got ideas and they're bringing them forward on both sides, and we're going to try to facilitate as much as we possibly can. But it does require to keep things moving, really top level technology that changes on a regular basis. We can't get ourselves ever into a situation where we're relying on technology that's 10 years old. That happens a lot in the federal government, or 20 or 30 years old. We've seen that before. We just simply won't be able to keep track of the paper and deliver the product in a way that allows the House to move in a timely fashion. And we figure, we're the last stop before something goes to the floor. It needs to move at the pace that the body wants it to move at, and make sure that we don't keep members sitting around waiting because we can't produce the work product quickly enough.
Thank you very much for that insight. We're always looking at ways to find enterprise solutions here on the House to improve efficiencies across all our committees. I appreciate both of your testimony here today. Appreciate your openness to participate in our commitment to regular order and accountability. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.
Chairman, how are you? Yeah, Jerry's on his way.
Chairman Jordan, Ranking Member Nadler, thank you for coming to testify today before our hearing. This is our commitment to restoring regular order to the People's House and to improving accountability and transparency to the American people. We'll recognize each of you for the purpose of 5 minutes for the purpose of an opening statement, and then the majority and minority will have a total of 5 minutes to ask questions. I'll now recognize Chairman Jim Jordan for the purpose of an opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, thank you for the invitation to testify today. The Judiciary Committee has an important mission, protecting the fundamental civil liberties of American citizens. We've all seen what's happened over the past several years. We've seen the First Amendment under attack from big tech and big government.
Chairman Jordan, could you double check your microphone is on? I can hear you, but I don't know that our live stream can hear you.
Is that better? Oh, sure, it is better. Okay. We've seen the First Amendment under attack from big tech and big government. Just read the Twitter files. We've seen how the Justice Department and the FBI abuse their law enforcement authorities. We've seen how the open border policies of this administration have led to crime, drained local resources, and allowed drugs to flow into our country. These are important and serious issues. They are the things the Judiciary Committee must examine. We expect to have an aggressive legislative and oversight agenda this Congress. In addition, the House has created a new select subcommittee within the Judiciary Committee on the weaponization of the federal government. To meet our immediate needs, we are respectfully asking for your consideration of a $2 million annual increase to our budget. In addition, we respectfully ask for access to up to $15 million for the reserve fund to meet additional needs of the committee and the select subcommittee as necessary. We've structured the request in this manner so that we have the resources we need, but to ensure we are also careful stewards of taxpayer dollars. Thank you for your consideration of our request, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much. Ranking Member Nadler, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairman Steele, Ranking Member Morelli, and members of the committee. I'm pleased to appear before you today to discuss the House Judiciary Committee's funding request for the 118th Congress. The House Judiciary Committee has historically been one of the most active committees in the House. Our wide jurisdiction, ranging from antitrust, immigration, and constitutional law to issues relating to criminal justice, civil rights, and the courts, places us at the forefront of many of the most pressing issues facing our country today. In fact, last Congress, nearly 2,000 legislative measures were referred to the committee, representing more than 16% of all bills introduced in the House. Under Democratic leadership, the Judiciary Committee held nearly 80 hearings, reported 83 bills and resolutions to the House, and had primary jurisdictional involvement in the passage of 110 bills and resolutions. Of these, we were able to enact 53 into law. I hope that under the Republican majority, the committee will continue to tackle difficult issues and solve problems with substantive hearings on meaningful legislation that moves to the House floor in a bipartisan manner. So far, they have produced very little, but I remain hopeful. With that in mind, I support the majority's request to increase funding for the 118th Congress. A funding increase will be critical to recruiting and hiring the staff we need to accomplish our important work and to providing them with the resources that they need to succeed. With so many pressing issues before our country, this funding increase is critical to allow us to continue to deliver results for the American people. I understand that the majority's plans, after subtracting amounts to cover administrative expenses and salaries for shared employees, to allocate 2/3 of the remaining funds to the majority and 1/3 to the minority to cover salaries. They also plan to maintain one shared employee for financial matters. This is in line with the committee's recent practice. Having said that, I do have several concerns with the majority's request. Unfortunately, we were merely presented with a copy of their request roughly 4 hours before it was submitted, and they made no attempt to seek any input from the minority. Since Chairman Jordan did not solicit our views, I hope to share some of our objections with you. First, we strongly object to the funding of up to 50 staff slots and up to $15 million for new select committee. That is greater than the entire Judiciary Committee budget, for which they request a little more than $11 million. If they really propose a $15 million subcommittee, they should say so. But by asking for up to this amount, we have no idea the real scope of the select subcommittee, which makes it impossible to plan for. And a budget, after all, is literally a plan to spend money. Apparently, they don't have one. We have other concerns that we hope we would have been able to share with them. Had they asked, we might have advised them that the numbers they use for administrative expenses are exorbitant, especially coming from someone like Chairman Jordan, who prides himself on being a fiscal conservative. I ask you to look carefully at the numbers in the presentation, and you will be shocked, as I was, that they are asking for double, triple, and at times even 30 times more than was actually spent last year. 30 times. For example, their travel budget is $260,000, up from $8,000 last year. That's a 30-fold increase. Their printing budget is up from just $689 to $20,000, a 20-fold increase. They propose to triple the amount of money spent on so-called other services, and they want to double the amount spent on supplies. They want almost $350,000 for equipment. Last year, we managed just fine by spending only $65,000. Now, maybe they really did a careful cost estimate and came up with these numbers. Unlikely, but maybe they did. Why do I bother mentioning it here? The answer is because all of this administrative funding comes first, before they divide up the salaries. Therefore, it shrinks the amount of money going to the minority to pay for personnel. Was this on purpose? Probably not. But it does have a significant impact on the minority, especially if that money, as I suspect, is never actually spent on the items that they say they plan to spend it on. Perhaps they could learn from our example and run a more efficient operation. If we have a cooperative arrangement between the chairman and ranking member, then I am comfortable sharing administrative expenses. If the expenses are equally shared, and if the majority supports the minority's efforts to use the funds as it sees fit, then it's okay to share. But, for example, if the Republicans don't want to pay for a HOPS system to track time off, and we do, then we do not get to spend those funds. And what if they don't want to pay for news sources they don't agree with? And what if they don't want to pay for computers or cell phones? Recently, they rejected spending requests on the personnel side of the budget as well. In response to question 3 on your questionnaire, they indicated there were no restrictions on how the minority was allowed to utilize its personnel funds last Congress. In response to question 4, they indicated that the committee would allocate funds to the minority in the same manner as in the 117th Congress. And yet, they have rejected personnel decisions by the minority already this year. They have indeed placed restrictions on how we spend the money. They have argued that we would not be able to spend more than They have argued that we would not be able to spend more than 1/12 of the annual personnel budget in any given month. We believe this type of restriction is unprecedented.
The gentleman's requested to conclude his remarks.
We would argue that so long as we have not gone over the total budget for the year, they ought to allow us to spend these funds as we see fit, just as we did when we were in the majority. Right now, we have no recourse if they reject our requests for expenses, even if our requests are rejected on a seemingly arbitrary basis. If that's the case, we do have a problem with the division of funds. If the division of funds is meant to enhance efficiencies by purchasing prescriptions in bulk, for example, that's fine. It's used as a tool by the majority to deny funds and resources to the minority. That's not a fair division of funds. Bottom line.
The gentleman's time's expired. We're going to make sure we get through everyone's testimony here today. I don't want to cut you too short, but I did allow you an extra minute. I would remind my colleagues that last year under the Democratic majority, this House spent $18.3 million on the Select Committee on January 6th with very limited oversight by this body, without Republicans appointed to that committee by our then minority leader, now Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy. The gentleman's not recognized. The gentleman was given his full 5 minutes and was graciously extended an additional 1 minute past that time. The gentleman is allowed to provide extended remarks in the written record through the duration of today if you'd like to submit additional remarks. The majority and minority will both be allowed 5 minutes for questioning the witnesses. I will now yield from the majority's time to Ms. Laurel Lee for the purpose of asking the witnesses questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Jordan, I would like to begin with the Select Subcommittee on Weaponization of the Federal Government, which has been added to the Judiciary Committee's responsibilities this year. Would you share for us what additional resources are needed in order for this Select Subcommittee to conduct its essential oversight and investigative work?
Yeah, we think, I appreciate the question. We think potentially a lot of additional resources, and that's why we asked for the reserve fund. I mean, never forget, we have an FBI that targeted moms and dads for showing up at school board meetings. An FBI that we learned a couple weeks ago in the Richmond field office said if you're a traditional Catholic, they're going to treat you as a domestic terrorist. We had a Department of Homeland Security attempt in this administration to set up a disinformation governance board as if some federal agency can tell you what's appropriate speech and what's not appropriate speech. Mr. Nadler just talked about free speech. I mean, you got to be kidding me. That's the biggest attack I ever see, frankly, on the First Amendment. And then, of course, we now have the ATF, which has rewritten a rule without any input from the Congress that could potentially make millions of law-abiding citizens felons for exercising their Second Amendment liberties. So, and that's just a quick sampling. So that's why we think that substantial reserve fund is so necessary.
And Chairman Jordan, mention was made of the travel budget and field hearings, and the Judiciary Committee just returned from a field hearing to the border. Is that right?
Sure did.
Could you tell us, please, why it is that you believe it is important for the Judiciary Committee to have the opportunity to conduct such hearings out in the field?
Because 5 million illegal migrants have entered this country in the last 23 months. If that doesn't warrant having a travel budget, there's a reason why the Homeland Security went to the border in the last 2 weeks. The Speaker of the House went to the border in the last few weeks. The Judiciary Committee went to the border in the last few weeks, minus Democrats who refused to show up. And there's also the Energy and Commerce Committee went to the border because it's such a substantial problem, not only to the communities on the border. We heard from the folks in Yuma. We heard from the hospital administrator in Yuma, who said that there were residents and American citizens in his community who had to go somewhere else, couldn't go to the maternity ward because it was full. I mean, they were helping migrants who were delivering children. You know, God bless them, of course they're going to do that. But citizens there had to travel to Phoenix or San Diego or somewhere else to deliver a child. I mean, that's the kind of impact it's having on the border. And of course, we're beginning to see this across the country. So that's why we felt it's important to have a travel budget as we deal with this immigration border crisis that we've seen now again for 2 years.
And Chairman Jordan, what restrictions were placed on Republican members and staff of the committee during the 117th Congress, especially when it came to conducting official travel?
That we were limited. Republican staff were limited traveling to the border in 2021. And I would point out, I don't know that we had even, we had to go, I think, over a year before we even had Secretary Mayorkas in front of the Judiciary Committee, which, as you all know, has primary jurisdiction over immigration legislation and immigration enforcement. But so we want to change that, and that's part of why we're doing and asking for the budget request that we're asking for.
And you mentioned in your initial remarks that you had proposed a budget up to certain amounts in a couple of places. Would you tell us, please, why you've chosen to do that instead of setting them at the highest amount that you think might be required?
Well, because, as I said in my opening statement, because we're United States Congress, we're supposed to be stewards of the American people's money, good stewards, and we felt, look, we're going to need resources to get to the bottom of everything that's going on. And the idea that you had the federal government telling big tech companies, literally emails to big tech companies saying, we think you should take down these posts and look at these accounts. As Professor Turley said, you had censorship by surrogate. That's frightening. So it's going to take resources, staff, and people to get to the bottom of all the things that are going on where the government, we think, has in many ways been turned against the very people it's supposed to represent, supposed to serve. But at the same time, we didn't want to come in and just have that money. We said we'll draw it down as is needed to do the good work that the Congress said should happen in this select committee.
Thank you, Chairman Jordan. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back the remainder of my time.
I reserve the balance of our time. I now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Morelli, for 5 minutes for the purpose of asking questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman Jordan and Ranking Member Nadler, for being here. I think I would just express personally my disappointment that of all the standing committees that are coming before us, this is the only committee that has been able to arrive at an agreement on the expenditure of dollars. We clearly would hope that that would be the case going forward. But in the last Congress, as in the Judiciary Committee under Chairman Nadler's leadership, mentioned some of the things. The committee was very busy. Passed more than 100 bills on the House floor, held more than 80 hearings, marked up nearly 100 bills in committee. And over the 4 years, again under Chairman Nadler's leadership and his predecessor, the Judiciary Committee ensured that survivors of sexual assault and sexual harassment are free to tell their stories and seek justice in federal courts, reauthorized the Violence Against Women Act, codified lynching as a federal crime in federal law, addressed the spate of hate crimes against Asian Americans and others in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, enacted the first significant gun safety legislation in a generation, enacted measures to strengthen the antitrust system, and in addition, a Judiciary Committee bill enshrined marriage equality into federal law. It was an ambitious agenda with a series of accomplishments with less money than is being proposed to spend in this Congress. So let me just begin. Chairman Jordan, would you anticipate marking up 100 bills in the committee in this Congress? Is that your goal?
I don't necessarily think the American people want us to pass a whole lot more laws. What I think they want us to do is deal with the border situation and deal with the government that I think so many Americans think has been turned against them in many ways. That's where we're going to focus. But we do anticipate passing immigration enforcement legislation out of the committee in the very near future.
So, and I understand that you may not be interested in marking up or passing as many bills as happened in the previous Congresses, but so is the resource that you've asked for, particularly the increase, are they, those resources going to be devoted towards investigations primarily, transcribed interviews, document requests? Is that the nature of what you see the spend will be?
The resources will be used for the committee's work, but I do anticipate a lot of the committee's work is going to be in the area you just described.
It would be what? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
In the area you just described, doing the constitutional oversight duty and function that we have as members of Congress to stop the behavior we have seen from so many of these federal agencies, and frankly, to propose legislation. This is our job, to propose legislation that would help remedy the situation.
Obviously, from our committee's perspective, and from my role here, is to try to ensure that the minority in each of the various committees has access to the resources they need to do their work. And so I want to ask whether you'd make sure that you pledge that the minority has not only the resources they need to do their work, but also unimpeded access to the resources once they're allocated.
We believe our budget plan does that.
I'm sorry.
We believe our budget plan does that and is consistent with what, the way we had to operate in the last Congress.
So, Mr. Ranking Member, Mr. Nadler, how would you feel about that? Do you feel you'll have unimpeded access to the resources from the committee?
No, we've already been blocked. They're enforcing a rule which has never been enforced before, which is to say that you get an amount of money, and 1/12 of that must be spent in each month. And you can't budget that way. So we've already been told that some of the people we want to hire, we can't hire yet. It's already harmed us. We've never done this before. Committee, or the majority gets a budget. The minority is supposed to get 1/3 after administrative expenses. But we've never had a month-by-month limit. Let me just also point out, in reference to what the chairman said a few minutes ago, we did allow staff and the ranking member to use funds to travel to the border last year, or in last Congress, I should say, when I was the chairman. We also went to El Paso after the mass shooting, invited all the Republicans to come. They chose not to.
And I want to be careful about my time, so there are a number of other questions I have. Clearly, I want to make sure there's a split of resources, even on the subcommittee on weaponization, et cetera, which I don't know that that's been agreed to. But we're going to please keep a close eye on this and continue to make sure there's accountability here. And with that, I'll yield back, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Next week, we'll be marking up these committee requests, but I will say, Chairman Jordan, you have a huge task in front of you as it relates to protecting the freedoms and liberties of Americans, as it addressing the border crisis and the immigration crisis that's played out under this Democratic president. And I know you have a request to increase your funding, but it pales in comparison to the $18 million that was spent by the Democratic majority last Congress in a partisan move on the Select Committee on January 6th. And so we'll take all that under advisement next week. We appreciate you both being here. Part of our commitment to return to regular order and to be transparent to the American taxpayers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairwoman Fox, Ranking Member Scott, thank you both for being here today to testify at our hearing on committee funding. Today's hearing is our commitment to returning to regular order in this institution, as well as providing transparency to the American people. You'll both be recognized for 5 minutes for opening statements. Then the majority and minority on this committee will have 5 minutes in total each to ask questions. I'll now recognize the chairwoman of the committee, Dr. Fox.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. While we were waiting, I cut out some of my remarks, but we'll submit the full text of them for the record, if you don't mind. Chairman Stile, Ranking Member Morelli, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear with my colleague, Ranking Member Scott, to testify about our budget request for the 118th Congress. The work of the Committee on Education Workforce is broad, from education and employment to health care and retirement. Our work affects every aspect of people's lives. That's why the work we do here is so important. In that light, we've proposed a fiscally prudent budget that will allow the committee to advance bold legislative and oversight agendas while continuing to serve as trusted stewards of the resources we've been given by the American public. The committee respectfully requests a 7% budget increase for the first session of the 118th Congress and an additional 6% increase for the second session of the 118th Congress. The pandemic gave us a window into just how broken our entire education system is. I know everyone here cares deeply about giving our nation's students the best chance of success. Working together this Congress, we can truly improve the education system and give all students the opportunities they deserve. We'll look for real solutions that help borrowers and protect taxpayers to address the broken student loan system. We'll also strengthen our workforce development programs so we can close our nation's skills gap and prepare the next generation of workers for our evolving economy. As healthcare continues to be a huge expense for Americans, we'll focus on strengthening and expanding access to employer-sponsored health insurance. The committee also will conduct vigorous oversight, ensuring the federal bureaucracy administers laws responsibly and as Congress intended. The executive branch has gotten too comfortable bypassing the legislative process set up by the Constitution. As the people's representatives, we should all be willing to guard the authority granted to us by the Constitution, regardless of which party is in the Oval Office. As I've said many times, my middle initial A no longer stands for Ann, but rather for accountability. Everything we do will focus on holding the federal government bureaucrats accountable for how they spend taxpayers' hard-earned money. In order to execute the committee's robust legislative and oversight workload, the committee must be properly staffed. We need to recruit, hire, and retain staff in order to enhance the committee's institutional knowledge and productivity. To enhance the committee's legislative and oversight efforts, we'll pursue a strong schedule of hearings in Washington, D.C., regional field hearings, and relevant site visits to hear directly from affected parties and see firsthand the challenges facing our schools and workplaces. The American people expect us to ensure that federal policies support and do not undermine their ability to pursue a lifetime of success and prosperity. Personally, my reputation for frugality is well deserved, which is why we commit to spending each dollar we're allocated efficiently and effectively as we do the work the American people sent us to do. We respectfully ask the committee to take these factors into account as you consider our budget request. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. I appreciate your time and am happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman Fox. Ranking Member Scott, you're now recognized.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Chairman Stile, Ranking Member Morelli. Good to see my colleague from Virginia and the gentlelady from California. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you as Ranking Member with Chairwoman Fox to speak in support of our bipartisan budget for the House Education and Workforce Committee. I also want to thank Chairwoman Fox for developing our committee budget and to support the request for the 118th Congress, which represents no more than a 7% increase over the last Congress. Although I believe our committee deserves more than a 7% increase, I do think it is at least sufficient enough of an increase to carry out our committee's legislative and oversight responsibilities. Moreover, Dr. Fox and I want to continue to be role models for our colleagues and work in a productive bipartisan manner so that we can continue to disagree without being disagreeable. For the past practice, 1/3 of the budget will be allocated to the minority. It has been our practice in the committee to provide the minority with autonomy over its budget allocation. I look forward to Chairwoman Fox continuing to honor this committee's tradition. Moreover, the budget allocation will allow the minority to continue its work with the highest level of professionalism and expertise. As you know, the committee has jurisdiction over matters that impact all walks of life: children, students, workers, older Americans. And as such, it is imperative that we attract and develop and retain a diverse, highly talented, and credentialed staff who can develop evidence-based policy initiatives to improve the lives of the American people. During the 117th Congress, this robust staff worked to present 60 committee hearings, report out 25 bills to the committee, passed 23 bills through the House, and had ultimately 7 bills signed by the President. And we had many other of our proposals adopted in larger bills, such as the American Rescue Act plan and others. Simply put, when Americans are struggling, the committee and staff delivered. As a result, we added more jobs into the economy in 2 years than any previous administration had added in 4, including 100% recovery of the jobs lost during the pandemic. We saved the pensions of over 1 million workers in the multi-employer pension fund, and at the same time protected hundreds of businesses from closing. We delivered the largest one-time federal investment in K-12 education in U.S. history and brought the number of Americans without health insurance down to the lowest percentage ever. Moving forward, in the minority, the committee Democrats and our staff will not rest. We pledge to work with Dr. Fox in areas where we find commonality, and we've already identified areas such as workforce development, juvenile justice, protecting consumers from surprise billing, and hopefully there'll be others. But we'll also press for the protection of the right of workers to organize, earn a livable wage that honors the dignity of their work in a safe workplace environment, free of harassment and discrimination. We'll also continue to promote equity in education so that students can learn in a safe, welcoming environment, and students can access and afford an education that will prepare them for the modern economy. And we'll promote food security policies and expansion of affordable health care. In sum, the minority on the Education and Workforce Committee remains committed to our legislative responsibility to put people over politics. And so I join Chairwoman Fox in asking the House Administration Committee to support our request, and thank you for the opportunity to testify. I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Ranking Member Scott, appreciate both of you being here. The majority and minority will now each have 5 minutes to ask questions of the witness. I'll start with myself. Chairwoman Fox, you have a robust travel plan. I think that's really important to go out and hear from the American people. Could you just provide a few additional details of what you look to obtain while being outside of Washington, D.C.?
Well, we hope to obtain what I think each member hopes to attain every time we go out into our district and talk to people. We want to hear from the people being affected by the policies that are passed by the Congress of the United States and how they are affecting them, and to receive suggestions on how we can do things better. It's an opportunity to hear from the public, not talk to them, but listen to them.
Thank you. I'm gonna shift gears slightly and kind of go into the mundane here for a second, because I know you correctly said you have a reputation for being frugal, and I think this House has an opportunity to be a little more frugal writ large. Inside of your funding request, there is $160,000 each session for the cost of subscriptions and publications. One of the things that we're looking at this committee is, are there campus-wide solutions to bring the cost down so that all of our committees aren't signing up for different subscriptions at different prices? Could you maybe just comment on that? Is there anything in particular that would be helpful if we had a campus-wide or house-wide solution that would allow us to bring costs down?
Yes, there are several of the subscriptions that we know are very expensive, and we applaud your looking at the opportunity to get those campus-wide, as you said. I think it's one of the law pieces that I can't remember, it's gone out of my head right now, that is very, very expensive, political pro. There's several like that that are very, very expensive. And we need those for CQ, Westlaw, that was the one I was trying to think of. Westlaw is very expensive, and anything that you could do to make these available to everyone instead of everybody having to get their own subscription would be terrific.
I appreciate your feedback on that. That's something that I think we're going to have the opportunity to look into to save taxpayers money by looking for some of these solutions rather than...
We, for example, did not continue to subscribe to National Journal in our office when it got so expensive, because I enjoy reading it, I learned from it, but it just wasn't worth the cost.
Absolutely understood. I'll reserve the balance of my time. I'll now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Morelli, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Fox, for being here, and Ranking Member Scott. I had the good fortune to serve for nearly 4 years on the committee, and have great appreciation for the work that you both do, and the members, and as well as the members of your staff, who I know who work incredibly hard. I wanted to, first, I'm grateful for the fact that you've come together around a distribution of resources. And as I've asked each chair and ranking member, first, just about the unrestricted access to the resources for the minority, would you commit to allowing them without impeding their ability to hire within their budget allocation?
Well, absolutely. That, as Ranking Member Scott has said, that's been the tradition, and I will fulfill that again.
Yeah, very good. Appreciate that. And Mr. Scott, are you confident in the relationship that you'll have access to resources that you need?
Yes.
The one thing I did want to note, and I appreciate the committee's emphasis on field hearings, and appreciate your anticipated travel plans for the 118th Congress. I had asked earlier for a couple of other chairs relative to the process that has been established with coordination between a number of different offices, Sergeant at Arms, Capitol Police, the Clerk's Office around court reporters, the Chief Administrative Office around broadcasting and live streaming. That system seems, by all accounts, to have saved time and money during field hearings that have been done in the past. Will you continue to utilize that system that we've used in previous Congresses?
Absolutely.
Ms. Torres? Okay. Very good. Thank you. Appreciate all the work you do. Appreciate you both being here. And with that,
Well, it's nice to see you, Mr. Morelli, and Ms. Torres again. She's now not on rules, I know, so I'll miss seeing her.
well, we welcome you
You
to come
too.
back here anytime. We appreciate seeing you here, and thanks for all your good work. I yield back.
I appreciate both of you testifying here today. We'll be marking up the full report next week. Your insights were helpful. I appreciate you being part of our commitment to regular order and restoring transparency to the American people. Thank you very much.
And
Thank
we-
you.
And we missed the gentleman from New York on the committee. He's a great member.
There is additional supply, there is additional energy to be pumped, harvested in the
Thank you.
Two minutes, yeah.
Okay, if you'll excuse me for just one moment. Nice room. I like. Yeah, nobody's. That's right. We have windows. You have windows. Yeah, it's kind of sad in our hearing, the people have on the television set the channel on cable that shows you the outside view of the Capitol, so they know at least what's happening outside. Yeah, exactly. That's right.
Chairman Turner, Ranking Member Himes, appreciate you being early. We're running ahead of schedule, so Mr. Himes is not late. He is early by 4 minutes. And so we appreciate you working with us here. Today is a hearing and part of our commitment to regular order and transparency of the American people. We'll allow each of you 5 minutes for the purpose of opening statements. Then the majority and the minority will have a total of 5 minutes each to ask each of you questions. I'll now recognize you, Mr. Turner, for the purpose of an opening statement for 5 minutes.
Great, thank you, Chairman Stile and Ranking Member Morrell. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of the budget request of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence for 118th Congress. I'm joined by my ranking member, Congressman Jim Himes. In recent years, the Intelligence Committee has been distracted by partisan politics. But at HPSC's organizational meeting earlier this year, the committee was addressed by Speaker McCarthy and Minority Leader Jeffries to deliver in unison one directive: return the committee's work exclusively toward national security and oversight of the intelligence community, and to do so in a bipartisan manner. Ranking Member Himes and I have accepted this charge, and we have echoed those expectations with the membership of the committee. To accomplish our requirements, we are requesting $17.2 million for the 118th Congress, including $8.2 million for the first session and $9 million for the second. The request represents a 13.9% increase in 2023, an additional increase of 10% over that for 2024. If supported, the request will fund HPSC's payroll, operations, and investments in information technology, IT, which are unique to our committee and are long overdue. With these monies, the House of Representatives is investing in a renewed intelligence committee that will not only conduct oversight and legislative responsibilities, but will offer significantly improved support to the standing committees of the House. This is an initiative driven by the Speaker's desire to ensure that the legislative activities of the House are fully informed, including when appropriate, by classified intelligence information. Just to underscore that, our committee is now open, and we are working diligently to provide intelligence information to the jurisdictional committees of the House. In presenting HPSC's budget, I want to provide you some context related to the challenges we face as we meet today. The United States faces unprecedented strategic threats from adversaries including China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. Our adversaries are investing heavily in modernized capabilities and become increasingly aggressive. They are testing our resolve, pushing the boundaries of international norms, and using all elements of their national power to divide and dominate. HPSI has a duty to understand these threats. Mr. Chairman and colleagues, timely indications and warnings are critical to sound defense and foreign policy. And despite the enormous potential of open source information, the vast majority of what we need to defend ourselves must be gained through clandestine and covert means. In addition, it is the Intelligence Committee's responsibility, the reason of its founding in 1977, to guard the American people from abuse originating from our nation's spy agency. Since our founding, we have enacted laws to prevent intelligence agencies from targeting Americans, but these laws and the IC's compliance require intensive oversight. Mr. Chairman, HPSI will become a better resource for the House. As you know, an essential aspect of our work is that it must be done behind closed doors, in a SCIF, and with strict security controls. Tight security is needed because HPSI maintains information related to the nation's most sensitive classified activities, activities that risk lives and come at great cost. At the same time, stringent security and compartmentalization from the rest of the House has limited our ability to serve the institution. I'm confident that we can do a better job in this. We've already demonstrated the value proposition of our new rules, updated earlier this month with shared intelligence to the various committees. Regarding the substance of our budget request, first, funding requests will enable the recruitment and retention of highly trained staff. Our staff all must have security clearance, which of course increases cost. Also, our funding request reflects HPSI's information technology needs. We are unique to the House. Due to the classified nature of our work, members and staff can only perform their work in the committee's offices, which is a secure, compartmentalized information facility, or SCIF. In recognition of the escalated counterintelligence threats to our operations, HPSI undertakes additional security-related steps, including the maintenance of a separate enclave and firewall within the House network. Additionally, devices in the committee spaces often require modification for use in a SCIF. The committee operates an internal classified network that is maintained exclusively by HPSI, on which the bulk of our oversight activities are conducted. The network's reliability and security is critical. Also, to accomplish our objectives, we must seek contractual support from information security system professionals with appropriate security clearances. Also, we maintain an air-gap system and a completely separate computerized system, which is unique within the House. The committee requests additional funding for its base information technology budget in order to support a Department of Defense and Intelligence Community-approved supply chain security program for network equipment. I cannot overstate the importance of this work. In short, I want to say we're the new Intelligence Committee. We're going to be doing more things, and we have additional members to our committee, and including having added committees of jurisdiction with opportunities to sit within our committee structure itself. We need to update our security systems, our information systems, and to be able to serve our members on our committees. I yield back.
Thank you, Chairman Turner. Ranking Member Himes. It's hard, by default, I almost went to Chairman, but we've moved you, is no longer on the Select Committee. Ranking Member Himes. I just remind the ranking member, your mic may not be on, which I can hear you just fine, but I don't think our live feed can hear you.
It was not on, I apologize. I will, however, keep going. HPSI, as the chairman said, is a unique committee in many respects, not least because the agencies we oversee operate nearly entirely in secret. Unlike other committees which can benefit from the expertise and research of outside experts, journalists, and others, we cannot use those sources. Meanwhile, the task before the committee is vast and growing. I would note that in addition to the Iran threat, the North Korea threat, the ongoing work against terrorism, the newly emergent crypto and other technological threats, the committee is now dealing with the Russia-Ukraine issue, which I'm not sure we would have anticipated many years ago. And of course, China-Taiwan becomes ever more demanding. We oversee 18 IC agencies and tens of billions of dollars authorized each year, a Herculean task that is done with a staff smaller than many other committees and oversees smaller agencies that are far less opaque. Additionally, the committee has grown from 22 members in the 116th Congress to 25 members in the 118th Congress, which necessitates additional staff and resources to support member engagements, briefing, travel, and more. The chairman did a great job covering the unique and specific IT needs, so I won't repeat what he said, but I will, however, just focus for a second on our staff. To perform the functions that the House and the American people expect from us, the committee requires a particularly specialized and experienced group of staff members. As the committee's budget submission reflects, additional resources for professional staff members would ensure the committee's ability to bring on highly qualified and specialized staff, including those with technical backgrounds in high demand in the private sector and elsewhere. An increase in budget resources as well as an accompanying increase in FTEs is more than justified and more important today than it has been in many, many years. Once again, I'd like to thank Chairman Turner for the strong partnership we have established, and I urge respectfully the House Administration Committee to support this request. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you both very much. The majority and minority will each now have 5 minutes to question the witnesses. I'll take the majority's time and yield to Mr. Loudermilk for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate both of you being here. I know, as working in intelligence in the Air Force in the past, I know how critical this is and how critical this committee is, because I think I have seen, and I think the American people have seen, some failures in the intelligence community over previous years. And in fact, I think maybe the committee had its eye off the ball in previous years. And so I'm very pleased to see the new direction and the leadership going forward. There are many challenges. You guys have brought challenges. I mean, everything from North Korea, Iran, Russia, and China. What do you see as the most significant challenges for the committee itself in this Congress, Mr. Chairman?
Well, one of the aspects about this committee that is different from others that needs to be taken in consideration when you review our budget is that every member has their own portfolio, and in that has the ability to order up briefings and to conduct overseas travel and domestic travel for CODELs for fact-finding. If you will, imagine a committee of 25 people where they all have the status of a subcommittee chairmanship in other committees. That allows us to have the breadth to deal with the broad areas of some of the challenges that we have. For example, from my background, I deal with nuclear weapons, both our adversaries and ours. We have Dr. Winstrup, who deals with bioweapons, chemical weapons, obviously COVID origins, and also the fentanyl issue. As you go through our committee, people like yourselves with your experience that you were expressing, have then that focus that allows us to have that 360 view of all of the threats and to be able to deal with them in support of the committee. That's one of the aspects that does increase our costs.
Okay. Well, thank you. And other areas that, as I look at it, it appears to have an impact. I'm probably one of the few members that actually go into the SCIF and I read the budget request. But, I mean, we've brought on Space Force since I've been in Congress. And you're obviously increasing the committee membership. What does the oversight of, let's say, Space Force and increasing the membership, what kind of impact does that have on the budget?
So, as I was describing, where each of these members have in our committee a status that another committee would be a subcommittee chairmanship, they need staff to be able to pursue their portfolio. Now, in addition, then, with the add of Space Force, it is not just the functions of Space Force, but it's the interrelationship between the IC and what Space Force is accomplishing, and looking to their future. We, like the Armed Services Committee, we vote on the budget and the funding priorities of the intelligence community. To do that, we have to be informed in what they do and what their future capabilities might be. And that process of becoming informed, it also is an expense.
Okay. Now, I actually worked in the IT sector in intelligence back when it was just coming to age as Ethernet was new, and so I understand the specific challenges that you have in your unique environment, and you've touched on it. How significant of of an impact does this, air-gapped IT network requirement have on your request?
It's significant. As you can imagine, we're a significant target. And also, we have to be in a way that we can host and marry ourselves to the intelligence community to exchange data and information so that we can review it, so that we can assist and help them. Those are very unique systems that you won't find anywhere else in the Capitol, and also cannot just be taken directly from the IC itself. So it is a unique system, but it has to be able to communicate with and protect the data and information.
All right. Well, I appreciate that. Last thing, Mr. Chairman, ranking member, any other information you'd like to share that we haven't covered?
The one thing I would say is that this is your new bipartisan intelligence committee. We are working together. My ranking member, Jim Himes, and I have both committed ourselves to that. That means that we're going to be doing more, not just with the additional members that we have, but doing more in interacting with the committees. And to be able to do that, we have to do it in a professional manner, and that is reflected in the budget we've submitted.
All right. Mr. Himes, anything?
Amen.
All right. Well, thank you both, and I yield back.
I now recognize the ranking member, Mr. Morelli, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chairman Turner and Ranking Member Himes, for not only being here, but the important work that you both do. I wanted to follow up the question from Mr. Loudermilk, just to give me a sense that the increase they requested, and you've talked about the uniqueness of your mission, can you sort of assign a percentage of the dollar increase? How much of that is as a result of the sort of uniqueness that the committee has in terms of its responsibilities?
I wouldn't be able to quantify it as a percentage, but I would tell you this. We're both the legislative branch. We're a committee of the House, and we're both operating on almost an agency level where we have the custodial responsibility to handle and manage the information and data that we receive from the intelligence community and its agencies. That duality, where we have to be equal to them in order to be able to do our function, causes an increase in costs for us, and that's reflected in our budget.
Very good. I note, too, in your written submission, relative to access to the minority for the allocation that's theirs, that you anticipate no changes in their ability to access resources they see fit under the allocation. Is that, I just want you to confirm that. I think that's what you said.
Correct. We're operating under the same that we had before, and I think Representative Himes can speak to this issue also.
Yeah, no, we've been working quite well together to make sure that it's both consistent with precedent and, fair and gives the minority the resources that we need. I think we're pretty close to there in terms of getting there on budget.
Thank you. I want to thank you both for the mission, and I'm grateful to hear about the Speaker and the Minority Leader both, giving you the charge of working in a bipartisan way. What you do is critically important to the future of the United States and its national security, and I appreciate all that you do. And with that, I'll yield back, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Well, appreciate both of you being here. We appreciate the work you're doing, too, and the new direction the Intel Committee is taking, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
He's been up here all day, so. The committee now welcomes Chairman Graves and Ranking Member Larson from the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. As a reminder, we have read your written statements, and we ask that you limit your testimony to 5 minutes each, and make sure that your mic is turned on, as we can hear you, but we want to make sure the live feed can as well. I now recognize Chairman Graves for 5 minutes, followed by Ranking Member Mr. Larson. Mr. Graves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member. I appreciate the opportunity to share with you today the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure's budget request for this Congress, 118th. In consultation with the Ranking Member, the committee has requested an 8% increase over our 2022 funding levels, and that level reflects an inflation-based increase and is going to provide the committee with the necessary resources to tackle our aggressive legislative and oversight agenda for this Congress. On the legislative front, the committee already has begun discussions on reauthorizing several major agencies and programs under the committee's vast jurisdiction. These include the Coast Guard, Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, PHMSA, the National Transportation Safety Board, which is obviously leading the investigation into the recent Ohio freight train derailment, the Maritime Administration, and the Federal Maritime Commission, and the committee's biggest undertaking, the reauthorization FAA, which is set to expire on October 1st. The committee also plans to undertake the regular review of Army Corps projects and programs in 2024. Equally important, the committee must provide oversight over the many laws and funding that was passed last Congress, including the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, the American Rescue Plan, and the CHIPS Act. These laws represent nearly $1 trillion in spending across every area of the committee's jurisdiction, from DOT to GSA and FEMA to the Coast Guard. The American people expect to ensure that the administration spends, expect us to ensure that the administration spends those dollars wisely and according to the law, and there is a shared interest in conducting that oversight. As part of that oversight effort, the committee plans a very robust travel agenda and is going to include official field hearings and also oversight of infrastructure projects and programs across the country. Infrastructure impacts every single corner of the country, and each community has very diverse needs, and we intend to get out there and see that firsthand. In addition, the budget accounts for the fact that the staff salary cap was raised last Congress, and the committee is very lucky to have many long tenured staffers with very vast, some vast institutional knowledge. And so our proposed budget is going to help the committee with staff retention as much as anything, but also allows us to be competitive in bringing on new staff to deliver on a legislative and oversight agenda. And with that, I look forward to answering any questions you have, and I yield back.
Mr. Larson.
Chair and Ranking Member and other members of the committee, appreciate the opportunity to join Chair Graves in presenting the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure budget request for the 118th. The T&I Committee has a long history of bipartisan cooperation, with both sides realizing the importance of investing in our nation's infrastructure, ensuring the safety of our transportation systems, and creating jobs. And I expect that cooperation to continue under Chair Graves' leadership. Now, just looking back to the 117th Congress, we passed bipartisan legislation authorizing the U.S. Coast Guard and the 5th consecutive and bipartisan Water Resources Development Act. We also acted decisively to bolster our economy, to limit the fallout from COVID-19, the pandemic, while modernizing and transforming the way people and goods move with the passage of several landmark bills, pieces of the American Rescue Plan, pieces of the Inflation Reduction Act, pieces of the CHIPS and Science Act, and of course the bipartisan infrastructure law. And part of the committee's focus this year will be oversight of these bills, particularly the BIL, to ensure the funds we provided are being used for the intended purposes. And I look forward to working with Chair Graves to do just that. As the Chair noted, we have a full legislative agenda for the 118th Congress. First and foremost, we must pass legislation reauthorizing the FAA before the end of September. The committee also intends to reauthorize the National Transportation Safety Board, the Coast Guard, the Maritime Administration, Federal Maritime Commission, and the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration's pipeline safety programs. But for us to do the job for the American people, we request that you fund the T&I Committee at a modest increase of 8% over our 2022 funding level. This funding will be used to ensure we can retain the oversight and infrastructure specialists who can help us achieve all of our objectives and accommodate a significant increase in travel costs due to the lack of travel during the past few years.
The committee has a robust and bipartisan travel plan to include both domestic and international travel that will help inform our legislative agenda and allow for greater oversight of the projects and programs under the committee's jurisdiction. As in the past, the committee will continue to provide 2/3 of the personnel budget to the majority and 1/3 to the minority. The non-personnel budget, like travel and other things, will continue to be shared fairly between the majority and minority. So I look forward to a strong partnership with the chair this year in the 118th Congress, and with your help, the committee and T&I will achieve our shared objectives and be one of the most productive committees in the 118th Congress. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today, and happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you, and appreciate you being here to testify. As you mentioned, the committee, your legislative agenda in the 118th Congress includes reauthorizing policies and programs for the FAA, Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, National Transportation Safety Board, U.S. Coast Guard, Maritime Administration, and Federal Maritime Commission, as well as beginning to develop the 2024 Water Resources Development Act, which authorizes projects and policies of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. You're going to be a little bit busy, I think. In your budget submission, you mentioned all of these activities will require the committee to leverage outside technology and software. What technology software is the committee evaluating? How will that software assist the committee in getting through this heavy legislative agenda in the 118th Congress? Mr. Chairman?
So the software, and we're using, we use, what is it, what was it? HOPS, which we obviously track our, the salaries and our leaves and stuff like that, which our personal office is using too. And so we're obviously trying to bring the committee up to speed and, and utilizing that technology, doing the best we can to, to provide that interactive, that opportunity. And also for people to be able to tie in when it comes to, we're also using technology and software when it comes to doing the earmark process through WRDA. And in the last, in the infrastructure bill that we were working on, allows the access to that and be able to pull that information down.
So the software is pretty critical?
Software is extraordinarily critical. Okay. It is, and we need to keep up with that.
And so this is an upgrade of the existing software you have? Okay. The only other question I have, the committee's budget request includes $203,765 in funding to pay for subscriptions to publications. If the House were to consider providing additional subscriptions on an enterprise-wide level, which subscriptions would be most beneficial to your committee?
Going back to what I was mentioning earlier too, we obviously have to, with some of that software that comes as subscription with that as well, and then obviously keeping up with the keeping up with everything that goes on in the entire transportation industry and what goes along with that. But updating that software is probably the biggest thing when we talk about updating, and the subscriptions that tie into that. It's just like the HOPS software that goes along with tracking salaries and leave and everything that goes with that. It requires a subscription as well, not just the initial cost of the software. So.
All right. Well, at this point, that's all the questions I have. I now recognize Ranking Member Ms. Morrell for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman Graves and Ranking Member Larson. Thanks for being here. Thanks for all you do. Just a couple of really quick questions. I've asked a couple of chairs about this. In the last Congress, when it came to field hearings and scheduling them and coordinating them, there was a sort of system developed that includes the Sergeant-at-Arms, the Capitol Police, the Clerk's Office for purposes of court reporters, Chief Administrative Officers, Office who responsible for broadcasting, live streaming, et cetera. Do you intend to continue to use that system, which we think saved a fair amount of time and money, and do you expect to utilize that, sir?
Yeah, I fully do. And we haven't done a lot, in fact, all of us in Congress, we haven't done a whole lot of travel the last couple of years, obviously because of COVID and the pandemic. And, we're going to do a lot of travel with this committee, and just simply because the travel itself is, is part of our jurisdiction, the biggest part of our jurisdiction overall. But we intend to utilize the same system.
Very good.
We've had in the past.
Appreciate the fact that you've agreed on the allocation, the split between the majority and minority. In your written submission, you indicated that the minority would not have any impediments to using their allocation, I assume you're going to continue to commit to that, sir?
Yes, yep. We don't have a problem at all with, you know, and we can adjust that too if we need to, but Rick and I have a pretty good relationship.
Good. And Mr. Larson, you feel confident that you'll continue to have access to your resources and you're comfortable with the allocations?
Yeah, the allocation is a traditional allocation for this committee. I can't speak to other committees. It's traditional for this committee, and I don't know of any circumstance in my 22 years in Congress where the existing majority tried to grab into the minority's allocation. And I have no concern at all about that. I will take Chair Graves' offer to increase that allocation that he just said at any time.
You'd
but
be
yes,
willing to accept that?
I'd be willing to deign to accept that, yeah, absolutely.
Well, very good. I appreciate both of you here, being here, for the good work that you do, and with that, I'll yield back, Mr. Chair.
Chairman Graves, Ranking Member Larson, thank you both for coming before us today. Today's hearing before our markup next week is really our commitment to returning to regular order in the House and restoring transparency to the American people, and appreciate both of your testimony here today. Have a good day.
Thanks, Chairman. Thank you, Member.
The committee is going to stand in recess subject to the call of the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member and members of the committee. I appreciate this opportunity to discuss the funding for the Science Committee today. Before I begin, I would like to commend the Chairman for restarting the formal budget process. I am a strong proponent of regular order, and I believe this process will pay off with increased transparency and more efficient spending. Unfortunately, my Ranking Member, Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren, couldn't join us today, but let me assure you this is a bipartisan request we're submitting today. And for the record, I would like to submit comments from the Ranking Member of the Science Committee. Thank you. Let me say right off the bat that our committee's request budget does contain some thoughtful, considered increases. It is our aim to act responsibly when it comes to spending taxpayers' dollars, which is why these increases have been limited to only what is absolutely necessary. Our priorities include funding a robust oversight program, resources for increased field hearings and site visits, modernization of our workspace, and modest increases in staff salaries to stay competitive with personal offices and the private sector. All told, our budget increase calls for 23.5% increase over last year. When considering that request, it's worth noting that our personal offices received a 21% increase in their MRAs last Congress. Standing committees received significantly less in order to fund multiple select committees. It's also important to note that the Science Committee's responsibilities have grown dramatically over the past few years. The purpose of the Science Committee is to ensure that the United States maintains our global economic, scientific, and technological leadership. That work is more important now than ever as we face a growing threat from the Chinese Communist Party. If given the chance, the CCP would not only take market share from us, but will also seek to impose their values on critically developing technologies like artificial intelligence, quantum information sciences, unmanned aerial vehicles. We cannot afford the economic, political, or national security consequences of falling behind the CCP. In addition to driving American innovation and countering the threat from the CCP, our committee is tasked with providing oversight for a substantial portion of the science agencies to protect taxpayers' resources and ensure that we're meeting our strategic goals. Since the budget for this committee was last set, there's been a significant increase in the importance of and scope of our policy area. Several major legislative initiatives, including the Energy Act of 2020, the CHIPS and Science Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, dramatically increased the budgets of departments and agencies under our supervision. For example, in addition to the committee's regular oversight of roughly $15 billion in annual appropriations at the Department of Energy, we'll now be overseeing an additional $45 billion in appropriations included in the IRA and the IIJA. There are plenty more examples just like this. The National Institutes of Standard and Technology, an agency with an annual budget of around $1 billion, received $52 billion in mandatory funding in the CHIPS and Science Act to support domestic semiconductor manufacturing. This increase in spending across our agencies must be accomplished by an increase, accompanied by an increase in congressional oversight. To do this, we need additional policy staff with expertise in highly technical issue areas such as quantum computing, fusion energy, advanced air mobility, and climate sciences. The competitive jobs market for these roles, combined with higher cost of living, mean the committee must increase our payroll budget if we are going to find staff capable of fulfilling our expanded oversight responsibilities. I'm looking forward to a productive year ahead as the Science Committee empowers American innovation and ensures taxpayers are getting the maximum return on their investments in research and development. I appreciate your time today, and as you notice, I'm attempting to be very prompt and look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We'll now take 5 minutes from the majority, then 5 for the minority for the purpose of asking questions. I will yield to Ms. Bice for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to say thank you to my fellow Oklahoman and chairman of the SST committee, Congressman Lucas, for being here this afternoon. Congressman, what impact has the increase in the Speaker's pay order in the 117th Congress and the competitive job market for staff with knowledge and expertise in the highly technical issue areas that we have to oversee in SST had on the personal portion of the committee's budget?
It's had a big impact, and it's the big reason that we're requesting an increase in our budget payroll. The changes to the Speaker's pay order and the significant increase in personal office MRAs last Congress has undoubtedly shifted upward the pay scale across all levels of Capitol Hill. And this is a good thing. For us to be competitive in hiring and recruiting the staff necessary to enact our agenda, we've got to follow suit, and we have to increase our staff salaries if we're going to have competent people.
Do you believe that that's because of the technical expertise that these individuals need to have to be able to provide
Absolutely.
information to the committee?
Many of the disciplines that we deal with in the Science Committee are very challenging, complex, hard sciences. There's only a limited number of people available, and they're the kind of people that industry and the administration looks for too. We've got to have folks who can work with us to ask the right questions, to look in the right corners. If we don't spend the money, we're not going to get them, and then we won't have effective oversight. And we spent a lot of money that we need to make sure it's well spent.
Thank you. In the answers to the budget questionnaire, you mentioned that the committee is in the process of researching and procuring document management software and have budgeted $80,000 for each session for this purpose. Are you looking to buy an off-the-shelf program, or is this custom-made software?
Staff is still doing the research, but I would anticipate off the shelf. I want to have an effective program to deal with this mountain of information coming and going, but by the same token, I think off the shelf is, if it's available, is the most cost-effective route. We don't need to create something special for the Science Committee.
For the record, I agree. Mr. Chairman, that's the end of my questioning. I yield back.
Thank you very much. The chair now recognizes the ranking member, Ms. Morelli, for 5 minutes.
Thanks so much, and thank you, Chairman Lucas, for being here. I appreciate your comments about the expanded work that the committee will have to do. I had the privilege of debating the rule on the CHIPS and Science Act. Grateful that it passed, and we have a great deal of work to do, both from a national and economic security point of view, and your committee's going to have a lot of responsibility for that. Just a couple of things that you could help me better appreciate. I know in the, first of all, the overall increase from the 117th to 118th Congresses, I did the fast math, it's about a third of an increase, about 33% increase over the 2-year period. And when you sort of look at it, obviously a fair amount of that is in personnel. So is it an increase in terms of the number, the census of workers, or do you expect a dramatic increase because of the type of people you're looking for will require higher compensation?
I would say it's a combination of both, but the most dramatic thing will just simply be the quality of individuals that we have to have. And we have outstanding people now maintaining their position on the committee staff, and their enthusiasm will be important too. When you have literally the amount of dollars that have been allocated and are flowing through the Department of Energy and other federal agencies, being able to oversee all of that. My personal perspective, as I've mentioned to various members of the committee, is CHIPS and Science is an example of where we made a dramatic commitment of resources in Congress to boldly step forward in a direction that we were falling behind in. Whether it's AI or quantum, there are a variety of other things out there that may require this sort of an effort in the future, perhaps near future, but in the future. I want to demonstrate that we were wise and efficient stewards of the citizens' resources with CHIPS and Science as an example, because then they'll trust us when we have to do something big and bold again. If we don't do that work, they might not ever give us the chance again when we really desperately would need it to move forward aggressively.
Thank you for that. I notice, too, that you have about $300,000 in the budget. I thought it was about $300,000. I'm looking for it. But in any case, correct me if I'm wrong on field hearings, but I didn't see any hearings actually scheduled. When do you anticipate having sort of an idea of where you'll go for field hearings?
When I have a better feel for the resources that will be available to me.
Well, let's assume that it was as you requested.
We have a myriad of national labs scattered all across the country, that some of which have existed since the 1930s, going and seeing them and addressing their infrastructure needs, the challenges they face. We have a variety of regular department research programs from Department of Energy on down going on. We have a number of universities, institutions who are doing cutting edge research, taking the members out in the field to see what's going on, to learn what the priorities should be, to verify the use of the resources. The committee is essentially brand new, membership-wise, and help bringing our people up to speed, both Republicans and Democrats, is critically important. That's part of why I'm so pleased with the relationship I had with my predecessor, Chairman Johnson, and now working wonderfully with my ranking member Lofgren. We're going to do this as a team.
Well, as one of the people who was a particularly big booster of the regional innovation hubs, I'm hoping to maybe invite you up to
Absolutely.
upstate New York. We'd love to have you. One other, two quick matters, but one is under what's called other services. I was looking, there's no further description in the chart. A big increase from 13,000 to 170,000. Can you just tell me essentially what that's for? Do you know? I'm trying to look in the detail. I don't necessarily see it. Non-specialized training went up 75,000, and other services an additional 82,000. It looks like to me. Primarily IT. Yeah, it looks like it's primarily web support and IT. Is that your understanding?
That would be the logical response, yes.
Okay, and then one, and I apologize, let me just, one last question. I didn't see it in the written material, but typically, I've been asking the chairs whether or not, given the allotment, 2/3, 1/3, whether or not you'll commit to allowing the minority access to their resources without impediment.
Absolutely, the customary relationship. I had a wonderful one as ranking member for 4 years with Chairwoman Johnson. I intend to have a wonderful one with the ranking member Lofgren.
Great. Thanks so much
We
for your
work
service,
together
sir.
on the committee.
Yep, and thank you for being here. I yield back.
Thank you very much for your testimony today, Mr. Lucas. I appreciate you being part of our commitment to reestablishing regular order and transparency. Without objection, each member, including our witnesses, will have 5 legislative days to insert additional materials into the record or to revise and extend their remarks. If there's no further business, I thank the members for their participation, and without objection, the committee stands adjourned. 4.5 minutes to make it to votes.